The Hangout is live. Everybody is listening to Chuck Braverman, Gabriel Spaulding, Patrick Southern. I'm Richard Taylor, Final Cut Pro Radio Live. We have a couple more guests that'll be coming in. We are going to be, of course, talking about the Apple announcement last Friday. Final Cut Pro 10.4 was previewed for us. It's not available yet. So we're going to get into talking about that. We're going to talk about how that actually happened at the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. We were all a little bit worried when it got to be 2 o'clock in the afternoon and there was no announcement of Final Cut Pro 10.4. I don't know, Patrick, when you went into the Apple campus, first off, we were at the summit. We had a we went to the AMC Theater and we saw a couple of presentations. We talked, Jeff Greenberg started the conference off, and then we knew we were going to Apple campus. So before you got to Apple campus, what were you expecting since it was after lunch?
Oh, I was expecting to see a presentation like we'd seen last year.
Right.
I wasn't sure whether it was going to be something that was launched that day or if it was going to be launched later on. I wasn't terribly surprised that the launch of the actual product was mentioned, for a later release, that it's not being released right now. What I was surprised by was the fact that they allowed anybody to talk about what we'd seen, because I've never been to an Apple briefing like that where they said, yeah, by the way, take photos and tweet out what's going on.
And they teased us. They did, didn't they? Because we got a PDF that said no photos, no video.
Right.
When we got to Apple campus, they said, by the way, you can't take any photos or videos while you're on the Apple campus.
Right.
No photos and videos during the presentation. On the way out of the presentation, they said, by the way, you know that restriction on photos and videos doesn't apply where you're going to the demo room.
Yeah, I was very surprised. And I was surprised that there weren't bigger applause and cheers to that, because that's completely unlike Apple. There's not been a single event where they've been like, yeah, sure, tweet this out. The closest we had was at the Lossy Pug meeting in November of 2016 when they started showing off the features of 10.3. They had a few members come up, and they didn't allow us to take photos or video, but they had a team that shot video that then published stuff to the Lossy Pug YouTube channel like a month later. So that's the most public I think they've been since the Super Meet when they initially announced Final Cut 10.
Absolutely. That was another, you know what? 10.3 not only updated Final Cut Pro, it updated the Final Cut Pro team.
Yeah, in many ways it did.
Because it seems like it's removed from some restrictions, it seems like, because ever since then they've been, whoever makes those decisions, I don't think it's the team itself, but whoever makes those decisions at Apple have relaxed their restrictions, because they had some kind of a preview at IBC. I presume it was the same thing we saw here that was under NDA. Right. So anybody that went there could not talk about it. Now, I was concerned, since I have a radio show, since I have a website dedicated to Final Cut Pro, I was concerned about any restrictions about what I could talk about after the presentation, because you can almost not talk about anything that I saw, but there was no restrictions. Did you guys know that? Well, Gabriel was there. What did you think, Gabriel, when you were headed in?
Well, I was pretty sure we were going to see a new version on an iMac Pro. I didn't think it would be released yet, and I definitely didn't think that we'd be allowed to record anything and share anything. I thought, but at the same time, I didn't think they'd have that many people sign an NDA. So it was kind of an odd thing. But I remember on the last Hangout, I bet you and Bill Davis, I said I'd buy you guys a drink if we don't get to play with the new version of Final Cut on an iMac Pro. Well, I didn't have to buy any drinks. That was great. But,
I forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, lucky me.
What did I think I bet Bill Davis something too. What was it?
It doesn't matter until he jumps on, unless you owe him something.
No, he has to owe me something. Whatever the bet was, I'm going to make something up that he owes me.
Well, Richard, speaking of people owing things, I never got those fries.
Okay. I have one thing to say about that.
Sure.
I'm owed an HDMI cable.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Did we never get you that HDMI cable? All right. Well, I guess we'll have to ship it to you in the mail then.
No, I'm not worried about it. We'll catch up at some point.
All right.
But I thought I offered you the fries and you already had a plate of fries. Didn't I go across the room? Hey, Patrick, I got your fries over here. And you had a big plate of fries already.
No.
Yeah. When you sat down the second day, I was with Mike Matzdorf and somebody from Apple and a couple other people, and you sat down in a booth by yourself.
No. I sat down maybe with Ryan Welborn.
Maybe, yeah. That's okay. I'll get you your fries.
No, it's okay. I don't mind. I had
mail them to you.
Tim David did give me an armadillo cookie. I was very happy about the armadillo cookie. That was very
excellent.
Anyway, I'm not worried about it.
So Patrick, Gabriel, what did you? So going into we were together on the bus going into the summit. So you thought that we would see a new version. I think we all thought that. The surprise was you could post about it. You could take pictures. You could take videos and post it.
That was the big surprise, and this was my first time at an event like this. And as much I'd love to go next year, we'll see if that's going to work out. But I know when I was there and we were in the room, I was just kind of swept up with like, oh, this is where I am. We're all here together. I think next time I'm going to do a lot more digging around the interface to actually see what's really in there. I ask questions about the stuff they advertised, the 360 and the color, but somebody noticed the audio plugins were updated. I never thought to look. So next time I'm going to be more of a detective, I think.
So that was Mark Bach that went into the plugin section. I met Mark for the first time. It was great meeting him. And when I was sitting at the table, I'm not going to say who it was an Apple Final Cut Pro person having lunch. And I asked them how much interaction the Final Cut Pro team has with the Logic Pro team. And he said, why? I said, well, I want you to make a trade. I said, from what I understand, you now have Logic 10 plugins. So please give Logic the skimmer, the live skimmer.
And in return, please give Final Cut the color options for rolls.
Well, we already got the plugins. There's one plug, we
got to keep jumping back and forth, and eventually.
Well, that's fine. I agree with that. He said I can't comment on things that we didn't show you, so he couldn't comment on the plugins.
Yeah, which is too bad because if they are in fact going into the new version of Final Cut 10, I think that'll be outstanding. It will be
outstanding, especially the compressors. The Logic. They have a vast, fantastic bunch of compressors. But here's the thing. Video editors will have to learn how to use compressors properly, not just put them on and boom, accept the default settings, because there's a lot of tweaks and things you have to do to optimize.
Yeah, otherwise you just bring up the noise floor and...
Exactly.
I wonder how many people are actually using Logic in a professional situation as opposed to sending out exporting AAF files to, somebody, a pro who's got Pro Tools and a real studio and doing it, or what do you think, guys?
Well, I think most film, high-end film is all going to Pro Tools. Everybody I talk to on the radio show that does high-end work, everybody sends their mix to Pro Tools.
Yeah.
So are you using Logic, in all your own internal stuff? Sure. Are you
well, I use Logic because I have a recording studio, so I'm very familiar with it. Before that, I used Digital Performer back in the late '90s. I used Digital Performer. Then when Logic came over to Mac and came over to Apple, I should say, I started using that. I was using both of them for a while, but once again, Digital Performer is fine, but it's $200 every couple years I don't have to pay if I'm using Logic, and they're very similar. And I would use Pro Tools if I was a youngster and I was had to go get jobs and stuff. I absolutely would get Pro Tools, but it's very expensive.
Yeah, my son is an audio mixer who's done a lot of. Patrick knows Max.
Yeah, Max is a good guy.
Max had used all the systems sort of growing up, and finally, as he got older and started doing real work, he has his own studio with the latest version of Pro Tools, and he complains about, having to buy a license every year. They upgrade. But it is the state of the art, and he has every bell and whistle. And when we had you know, Patrick, we had all this audio that wasn't very good and it needed to be restored. We sent it to Max, and he had stuff that nobody else had. I think he had, you know, filters that didn't even didn't exist in the outer world, because he has a friend over at one of the audio plug-in companies that gives him all kinds of experimental stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So Pro Tools is ubiquitous the same way that Photoshop and After Effects are ubiquitous. Everybody, maybe even more so, everybody uses Pro Tools. That's what they go to. I'm not saying that Logic will replace Pro Tools. I'm just saying that since I already have Logic and I know Logic pretty well, that's what I use. Right. And I'm very comfortable with it.
Have you seen that story online or whatever it is about going from Final Cut to DaVinci Resolve and then being able to export audio out of DaVinci Resolve to Pro Tools? You know about that?
There's a couple of tutorials. Patrick, didn't you do one about getting audio from Final Cut to Resolve? Didn't LumaForge do that? Oh,
uh-oh.
He just left. Uh-oh, that was a question I shouldn't have asked. He just dropped out. So I've seen a couple of different tutorials on getting, you talking about getting audio into Resolve, into Pro Tools?
You can, there's a tutorial that I saw that you can export Final Cut Pro XML to DaVinci Resolve.
Right.
And now you have all the audio, and then you can export from DaVinci Resolve the AAF files to, you know, my son Max, or to any mixer in Pro Tools, which they still haven't added on. You know, that you had to have the Extra Pro, or what was it? You know, that
right. You still have to have Extra Pro. So if you're doing it for free, Resolve makes sense as an intermediary. But you know, Resolve also has Fairlight built in now, so the number of times that you would want to go from Resolve to something else seems like it would be less often. But from what I understand, the tool set in Fairlight's still not quite there, so it would make sense to maybe do that. Yeah.
So we're on the YouTube chat. We have Mr. Ben Broadbeck. I really missed not seeing him at the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit.
Yeah, it was kind of a sad day to not have been there. He definitely.
The last time he almost got arrested at the Apple jail. So
did he really?
This time I was going to prod him into getting arrested so we could film that.
I don't remember him getting arrested last time.
Almost.
What did he do?
Just a joke.
Was he walking out the door with one of the new iMacs under his arm, or something?
He must have took a picture of something illegal.
Oh.
Oh yeah, I mean that would do it. You know, that'll put you in Apple jail.
People don't realize that. So one of the things I wanted to say about the presentations, first off, we were all at the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit put on by Future Media Concepts in cooperation with Apple and in cooperation with LumaForge. LumaForge is a platinum sponsor, and I know for a fact that LumaForge does a lot of behind-the-scenes things involved with putting on that conference. So one of the things that I want to comment about is that Patrick Southern is an excellent presenter.
Oh, thanks, Richard.
Not only did you have knowledge, you were very friendly, you were well prepared on your subject matter, and I had no idea. I don't think I've ever saw you live before.
Well, surprise, surprise. Yeah, I think I'd given part of a presentation at last year's summit, but it was, you know, I think it was a lot more fun getting to hang out with everybody for a full 75 minutes this time. Yeah. And there's Mr. Gallardo. Hello.
Yeah. Hey, Tony. What's up? Tony
hello,
Gallardo,
everyone. How's it going?
We're live on YouTube right now.
Oh, wait, we're on YouTube?
Yeah, live.
Let me go change.
Too late.
Live is with about a 10-second latency, I would say.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I did this, and now if I look over at YouTube, which I have on another monitor.
Just keep it turned down, that's all.
It's off. It's about
so if anybody has any questions on YouTube, we have 1718 watching right now live. If anybody has any questions, just type them in the live chat, and we might get to them. We might. Some of them we will, some of them we won't. One of the things that Ben Broadbeck asked if I'd do a tutorial once 10.4 drops on using the new compressors on Dialogue.
That's a good idea, Richard. You should do that.
Yeah, I can do them now, but they won't be any good until 10.4 comes out.
Yeah, I think we're going to need a lot of new education when 10.4 comes out. You know, the VR tools seem pretty expansive, as do the color tools.
So were they VR tools versus? I watched Steve Martin's tutorial today explaining the difference between VR and 360. Were they VR versus 360?
What is the difference, if you don't mind? I'd like to know.
Well, I think 360 is like an actual photographic view in 360 degrees, whereas VR is like artificial elements creating the space or integrated with the space.
Within a 360, or is it just
Well, one is like reality still, and one is not.
Yeah, a reality that you can modify live versus a reality that's been pre-recorded and projected to a sphere which you are observing.
Yeah, so I guess really the tools in Final Cut are more for 360 video, because virtual reality would have that 6 degrees of freedom that they talk about. You know, the ability to look around any direction and move forward, backward, left, right.
Yeah.
So I guess technically we saw 360 video as opposed to VR in that regard. But they still had some pretty awesome tools. Did you guys, any of you guys put the headset on while they did that transition through the titles into the new space? So they did like that dolly move through the iris swipe. Anybody do that?
Nope.
No? That was pretty cool. I don't remember who it was, but they told me, yeah. Oh, it was Trevor Horton. Trevor Horton said, yeah, while you're in there, make sure that you watch the iris swipe pass you by. So you actually get to watch this border surround you as you move into a new scene. And that was kind of mind-boggling and visually stunning. But
what resolution was it playing out?
Oh, I feel like it was 8K, wasn't it?
For the VR or for the 360?
For the 360, I think, well, it was at least 4K. It was at least 4K wide in the equirectangular. I thought it was maybe 8K for whatever reason. You can actually see on the pictures on Twitter. Anybody wants to look those up.
Okay.
But they were the cool thing about the VR performance that you don't necessarily get everywhere else is that even if your frame rate isn't 60 frames a second, they're still feeding 90 refresh cycles a second into the headset. So they're actually feeding 3 different viewers: the equirectangular viewer, the 360 flat viewer within the UI, where you can click and drag within the interface and see what it would look like, and then within the headset. So the fun thing about moving your head around and getting that 90 cycles a second is that even if you're not getting a new frame, you're still getting a new part of the frame as you're moving your head. So having the 90 cycles a second helps prevent, judder and motion sickness and that sort of a thing.
And I saw, go ahead.
I'm more interested in 360 video. I mean, I kind of I'm curious about that. If I can get a high quality camera for not too much money, I'd be interested in experimenting. VR, not so much. For me, I don't do any gaming stuff.
360 has actually been around for quite a long time, and I don't mean video, but I can remember back in the 70s going to Expo 70 or something like that, and there were some pavilions that had some 360, and Disneyland had 360, several films that were made in 360s going back, I'm sure, as far as the 70s. It was all on film, of course, but it was 360 for a long time.
Hey, look who it is, Ben Broadbeck.
Gentlemen.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
How's it going?
Going well. Good to see everyone. Sorry I couldn't make it to the summit.
Yeah, I was disappointed, but those things happen.
I spent all my fun tickets on building a new house that I'm sitting in. So.
Yeah. Did you save some of that money for me, Ben, for my new iMac Pro?
I am working on, we just planted the seeds for a money tree, so we'll see.
Okay. All right, good.
Hopefully everything comes through well.
That's good. That's progress. I like it.
So Ben, what from the outside, what did you think about how things went down? I mean, I tried to do as much live streaming as I could. I started Thursday night and I did one as soon as I could. As you were getting the information, what did you think from the outside?
I really like the color tools. I mean, we're all at least familiar with color finale, chromatic things. Having those things built in, to me, is a big deal. Reason being is I can now walk up to any Final Cut Edit suite, and I know that I have a very deep level of grading that I can. I'm still going to use Color Finale Pro and Chromatic at certain times, but now it's not as necessary, and I just like to not be dependent on some of those third-party things if I don't have to be, because sometimes we move around from place to place, and you don't get to bring all of your effects to every single place that you go. I really liked that you could to have the ability to do the curves. That was very cool. I'm looking forward to that. The 360 stuff, I figured it had to be involved since Tim got brought on with Apple. I don't know how much I'll use that stuff, but I'm generally happy about it. I like that we can now jump between clips of a specific role as we're going through. If we want to say, okay, work on all my titles, okay.
Right, that was very cool. I really like that.
Yeah, I was asking around to see if there's any other small things that are being done. I guess for me, the argument of like, oh, is Final Cut Professional is like way gone and done. I mean, I'm not worried about that anymore. I'm more interested now, like, what are the little refinements, the little things that they're doing to make this app either quicker or have small things that, that full-time editors are really going to be interested in.
So were you interested, were you expecting us to see something and not be able to share it?
Okay, so here's the way I look at it is, last year when they dropped 10.3, one of the things to me that's a dead giveaway of a new version is when the ripple training tutorials kind of seem like they're reaching. And not to say that they're like poor or bad, but you're just like, I think they're kind of near the bottom of the bag of ideas here. It was a dead giveaway last year that they were going to do it. And within 2-3 weeks, then they started putting their tutorials on sale. I'm like, I think this is going to happen. So when they didn't release anything on whatever the first day of the summit was it Thursday?
It was Friday, but we did a live broadcast from my room on Thursday night.
Yeah, once 10 a.m. Pacific came on Friday and we didn't have anything, I was like, oh, really? That's kind of surprising. But,
right.
Again, I think somebody said it in one of the live streams that you did. It's like, I think Bill Davis said, they're not going to have everybody come out here and not do something.
Right.
So when they at least announced 10.4 and let you guys take pictures and share that stuff, I wouldn't say that I was at all surprised that there was some type of announcement. Even if it wasn't a release, I was expecting something to come out of this that was we're going to put our flag, in this being our announcement and this being a reason that you want to come to this thing, especially once Apple, decided that they were going to do the summit in conjunction with FMC. I'm like, yeah, there has to be something. Otherwise, there's no real reason for Apple to do this because they haven't done it historically in the past.
Right.
Kind of.
So those color tools are a lot more complex than they appear on screen. There's a lot of things you can do with them. I was surprised. Gabriel, you were with me when Apple guy was showing us did they just seem like they look simple, but there's more things you can do than with a normal color wheel.
Yeah, you can click right on the image, and it'll place a stop, I guess, or an icon in the color wheel to let you know exactly what value that is, so that you can match and adjust. And little tiny refinements, like it'll show blue or orange on the sides if you're dragging in that direction, and it's like, obviously, if you are intending to warm up your image, it's going to be orange. Just having that visual reminder is, these little embellishments are really nice. The color in general got me thinking about the whole approach that Apple has with Final Cut, in that, you know, you've got this application that does most things for most people, and you can get third-party plugins for it. You know, so we've had Color Finale, and now we've got Chromatic, and now we've got all that built into Final Cut. So it's like, you know, how does Apple decide, how do I say this? We already had providers giving us third-party solutions there, just like we do with, you know, sending to Pro Tools and this and that. So how does Apple decide, well, maybe this should be part of it and not left to third party? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's their barometer for deciding, you know, yes, we'll finally have dupe detection, or leave that to somebody else, that type of thing.
That raises a good question about what their relationship is with plugin developers. And I wonder how Denver Riddle is feeling this morning, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, because Denver also just announced the new version of Color Finale last week as well. I think like the day the summit began. Now, the cool new thing that you can do in Color Finale that you still can't do in Final Cut is generate your own LUTs, right? So you can, within Final Cut, generate a LUT, and assumably you'd be able to now, when you generate your own LUTs, then apply that using the custom LUT plugin, or you could even add it in the browser using the new custom LUT tool for the custom camera LUTs, right, in the inspector. So you can select in the inspector, scroll down, say add LUT, and you could add the LUTs that you created in Color Finale, which I think would be kind of an interesting.
Does that
Chromatic has tracking, right?
Yeah.
That the others don't have.
Yes, they do.
That's true.
So what does that mean? Tracking like what? Like SliceX and Core Melt stuff?
Yeah, like if you needed to color correct a face that was moving, say, across a scene, you know, that Resolve has it, I'm sure. Any kind of isolated correction that has to track an object over time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm personally not a huge fan of planar tracking for color correction. I'd prefer to use a point cloud tracker. But, you know, Chromatic does, in fact, have a planar tracker built in, which is better than what you have built into Final Cut natively, for sure.
Right.
So, Patrick, can you take a LUT that you create in Color Finale and then have it available to Final Cut users who don't have Color Finale? Is that what I was hearing you say?
Yeah, so they've got two different ways that you can get LUTs into Final Cut now. You can either in the timeline use the custom LUT effect, or you know how you've got your LUTs for switching from like Arilog C to Rec 709 and that sort of a thing?
Sure.
So if you go to that same drop-down menu, there is, they showed us a place where you can add either a single LUT or an entire folder of LUTs to then add to that menu. So you could create, you know, even 4 or 5 different looks for a particular show, maybe in Color Finale, export those LUTs, put them in a folder, and then they could import that folder into Final Cut and actually apply those LUTs before cutting the footage into the timeline. So you're not having to, you know, open clip to apply a LUT. You can just apply that LUT through, you know, through the inspector.
That's almost as cool as being able to make generators and titles and transitions for Final Cut. I mean, it's the same idea.
Well,
Yeah.
when you export a LUT, that's just generic, right? It's not proprietary to whoever exports it, right?
Right. It's just a file.
Anybody can use it.
Yeah.
If you export a LUT, anybody that imports LUT should be able to use that LUT.
Correct. Now the question is, will the color transforms of that LUT be accurate, you know, across platforms? Will a LUT exported from Color Finale read the same way when it's imported into Final Cut? And you would imagine if you're working with Color Finale with the same footage without any log processing, that, you know, you'd probably get a similar color result. But, you know, that's something that we all need to test once 10.4 comes out.
Yeah, what type of LUT? If it's a 16-bit or is it what type of LUTs does Color Finale export?
That's a great question.
I don't know.
It just got released, and I haven't had a chance to update yet.
Ah, gotcha.
Another thing that Denver did in Color Finale, which was, I don't know whether it was good news or bad news, but he has this LUT generator. But he also, and he gives you a number of LUTs with the new Pro version. But then there's another tab you open up, and there's like, you know, 100 other LUTs that you could buy from him.
Oh,
and they weren't cheap. I mean, you know, they you know, big picture. I don't know. They weren't, you know, $2. They were $20 or whatever the number, I forget. That was kind of weird. I mean, you know, you upgrade to the later version, Color Finale Pro, 2 days before Apple comes out with new color, and he's selling, you know, he's selling LUTs, which is, look, I don't blame him. He has to make a living.
Is that something that only is provided through Color Grading Central, or is that something that users can, is it like a marketplace, or is, you know what I'm saying, where users can make their own LUT?
No, it was through his company.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Denver has, over the years, you know, developed a lot of LUTs. There's the Ascend LUTs, there's the Osiris LUTs, there's the Impulse LUTs. So he's got a lot of LUTs, and I'm assuming that the reason he rolled that into Color Finale is because you've already got the LUT gallery. So if you want to just add some additional looks, you know, might as well just buy them right there within the application. So I understand why he did it, but, you know, it is kind of interesting that you're paying for an upgrade because, you know, you want access to the Ascend LUTs, and then all of a sudden there's this store full of other LUTs. I understand where Chuck's coming from on that.
So Patrick,
and what are LUTs anyway? It's just a, you know, here is my version of such and such a LUT, where you turn the red up here and the blue down here, and et cetera. It's just, it's not anything that's really, I'm not putting them down. I mean, it does take a skill to make a LUT, but it is not anything proprietary.
It's right? A canned look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patrick, didn't somebody say that you can make LUTs in Photoshop?
They might have. I didn't hear that said at the summit.
I think Jeff Greenberg said you can actually make LUTs from a photograph in Photoshop and export it as a dot, whatever's a dot cube or whatever that.
Yeah, it would be like a dot cube. I wouldn't be surprised if you could.
Yeah. So
I would be surprised if the color science in Photoshop matches that in Final Cut, and you actually.
That's a good point.
You know, but we'll find out, I guess. You know, again, we'll have to wait till 10.4 comes out and people start playing with importing look LUTs. You know, obviously the Ascend LUTs that Denver created, they demonstrated using those as creative LUTs within Final Cut 10. So it's safe to assume that, you know, using the creative LUT tool within Final Cut, you'd be able to get accurate results there.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to have to be careful about where we get our sources, because, you know, a LUT that looks good in Assimilate Scratch or in Express Dailies or in Premiere or wherever else may not look good in Final Cut. We don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the curious things that from this update came out. So when I talk to people who do color on Final Cut Pro Radio, or people that even dabble in it like myself, one of the questions I ask them is what do they like, the color board versus color wheels? So it's been 6 years, right? We've had the color board, and all of a sudden now we have both the color board and color wheels. Same with the white color balance picker. iMovie's had it for a while, and now after 6 years we have that in Final Cut Pro 10. I find that very curious. Thankful though, because I do prefer wheels to the color board.
Sure.
I'm glad that they did bring on the wheels. I mean, I love the color board. It made sense. You know, you've got subtraction or addition of color. But for me, the biggest thing is the curves that they added, the hue versus sat, the hue versus luminance. That is really huge. And I'm curious to see the level of granularity, you know, how fine you can make adjustments. Mm-hmm. That's one thing why I like Color Finale, is that I feel like my adjustments translate better versus it feels a little sloppy with the exposure controls, the pucks, and the pucks on the color. So I'm really curious about that. I'm also curious to see if the curves translates via XML to resolve as well. Interesting to see if that happens. You know, because I think you can get the color board to translate over to resolve.
Something that I thought was a small change, but I think is really a big deal, is the fact that the inspector now has a color tab. And so now, you know, if I do 4 or 5 instances of the color board, and I'm normally jumping back and forth to do masks and to do, you know, eyedroppers to key a certain area, I'm not going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth anymore. It's all just in one page, and I think that's going to be a huge time saver, at least for me.
Yep.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
You know, Tony, regarding your question about granularity, I think I saw somebody show a keyboard shortcut where you were able to like modify whether it was a sweeping adjustment or if it was a very fine adjustment. I think it's
Yeah.
the option key or something.
Yeah.
So while you're working on your exposure, you can click and drag, and it'll slow the adjustment down.
I still feel like color finale just has a better rendition of some I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I get a better quality out of color finale.
Is Denver paying you to say that? Oh, I'm only joking, of course. I have color finale too. So the idea is that I don't think that color finale is going away. I think they're going to have to step up their game even more to justify people paying for their plugin versus the native one in Final Cut Pro 10. So we expect, I expect, and I'm not saying anybody else, I expect this to be out in December. Yeah. So maybe within a month. I'm not at Christmas. That would be stupid. It has to be out before Christmas.
We would hope. Yeah.
So, well, no, they didn't guarantee us. They didn't say anything other than there's sometime this year. But you can expect the fact that they showed it to us. I expect it to be out, within a month or so. So, right. Like in the beginning of December, mid-December.
And then, do you think we'll have to wait another year for another feature update?
Normally, it's longer than a year for a major, for a point 3 to 0.4. Usually, it's longer than a year.
Sure, but sometimes you'll get a major thing, like multicam was 06 or whatever, right? So
03, 0.03. No, they used to do that. They used to do point updates with features. They didn't do it this last year. Okay. No features in 1 year. They just did bug fixes and enhancements.
But I feel like ever since the Creative Summit started and since 10.2, we've started to see a pattern where we are getting those little bug releases throughout the year, and then around Creative Summit time, they at least announce something. So my gut instinct says that, yeah, I'd expect that we'll see something along the lines of like a 10.5 sometime late next year. That would be my guess.
Well, we know when it's coming out, whenever the Creative Summit is.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you can make
not necessarily. They could fool everybody and come out whenever they want. I mean, they're Apple and we're not.
Well, the thing is, though, when I talk to Jeff Greenberg on the radio show and others, I pointed out this is the first year that it says in cooperation with Apple on the website. Even though Apple has been behind the scenes doing stuff in years past, this year it's publicly stated in cooperation with Apple.
Well, so that doesn't mean, though, that they can't come out with something before next year's Creative Summit.
Well, it wouldn't be a full point update because it's usually longer than a year.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the draws for this year's Creative Summit was the fact that we're all thinking, oh, 10.4 is going to drop here, 10.4 is going to drop here. Do we think that if they were to drop, so let's go ahead and say next October 2018 is going to be the next summit, and if something were to drop in, I don't know, June, July of 18, we went to 10.5 right there and then, would that kind of hurt the draw for the Creative Summit? Or I guess what I'm asking is, has the new release become the draw for the Creative Summit, or is it, still about the classes and the content there?
Well, if you're local, I mean, the Creative Summit, it's $1,000 or whatever for the sessions. And then you got to pay for the hotel. Then you got to pay for travel. So if you can get these sessions, I mean, first off, you don't get Patrick Southern everywhere. And you don't get Steve Martin and Mark Spencer in person everywhere.
Right.
Right? You get them at the summit.
I thought the draw was the fries.
That Armadillo Willie's, absolutely. That was.
So, Richard, this is a good time. That's a perfect transition into a new venture, which I'm going to be doing, which I hope you'll all be interested in if I can talk about it for about 2 minutes.
Sure.
And you're talking about, a conference where you cost $1,000 and you have to be at the hotel and, $200 a night for the hotel room and the taxi and the meals and everything else. So I used to put on a conference here in the Los Angeles area called the Weststock Conference for documentary and reality filmmakers. And it was very successful. We did it for 5 years. We did it at a couple of hotels in Santa Monica, and then we went to what's now the ArcLight in Culver City. And it's for filmmakers that want to know what the networks are looking for. and how to produce for them, how to sell to them, and so on and so forth. And I had a business partner and I, Richard Proper, we produced this, and like I said, it was very successful. And we thought after we did it the first couple of years, it would become less time consuming for us, but it became more time consuming because we knew better at what we were doing. And we ended up spending 6 months out of the year, and we really weren't making any money on it. And so we stopped doing it a couple of years ago, but we have a very good name, you know, and a good mailing list. So I decided that I am going to put on a mini version of the Westock online live. And by that, I mean, I would like to put on maybe once every 2 weeks, a under an hour panel, not unlike what we're doing right here on Google Hangouts.
Right.
Except that I would have, you know, hopefully the head of programming for Docs from New York, Sheila Nevins, on live, and somebody from BBC or Channel 4 and 5 in London live, and somebody from LA live, and a separate host asking them questions about what's the theme, what's happening. Maybe it'll be about the Academy Awards, you know, 1 week, and maybe it'll be about 10.5 in cameras another week. So it's called Westock Online, and the model is going to be for free so that anybody will be able to watch it live or after the fact, and it will be sponsored. So we'll have a couple of, you know, major sponsors. And I think that just the fact that we're here having this conversation live, to me, is really exciting. And YouTube has I've become somewhat obsessed also with YouTube. I can sit, you know, working on Final Cut and trying to put something together. And when I hit a roadblock and I can't figure out or I can't remember how to do something, you know, I have subscribed to Steve and Mark's, you know, all their training. I have all their training, but in a way, it's easier just to go to YouTube and say, how do I do such and such on titles on FCPX? Or how do I do this or that? So I think this is a major revolution. It's happening. And if I was a 20-year-old filmmaker instead of my age, I would be making films on YouTube right now.
No, absolutely. To address what you're talking about, it's really two different things. So yes, these chats are really, really cool. I really enjoy doing live streaming and stuff. However, the Creative Summit, you get to have lunch with Philip Hodgetts.
Oh, I don't take away. I totally agree. That's the one thing that will be missing from this.
And you get to
that personal networking.
You get to teach. They get to teach you live, which is different than the video. So they both have their place. And the summit's only once a year. And I think as long as Apple is involved, they will always have a presentation of something
I completely agree with you. This does not replace the live summit. As a matter of fact, I'm going to a live summit tomorrow, and it's costing me $600 or $700 to go down to a hotel for a day and mingle with some people about live streaming.
It's Bill Davis.
Yeah,
it is Bill Davis.
Call at the last minute, and I just got delayed.
It's not acceptable.
To make money? I thought that was the purpose of all of this.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed that part.
We're supposed to be making money here too?
Oh,
Don't tell anybody. People are supposed to think this is just fun.
I'm in the wrong business.
Can you explain to us how that works? The making
money.
Yeah. You put out some feelers, and 3.5 years later, a few dollars flow in. That's how it works.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm ready. Go ahead. I'm ready.
Did everybody have fun? What do you got? Well, I can't catch up with what you've already talked about, so I'm going to figure that you've solved all of the world's problems regarding Final Cut Pro 10 in the early part of this chat.
Yep.
We'll start over for you, Bill.
We're up to 10.6 now. We're just going.
Ooh, how exciting!
As far as you're concerned about, you know, if a major update drops in the summer, will that affect attendance for the Creative Summit? I've only been there 1 year, this last one, but while as cool as it was to be at Apple and to see the release, I think it was very cool. By far the best part. It wasn't even the sessions. It was all the in-between time, as Richard said, talking to all the people from all over the world who do the same thing, but in slightly different industries, some bigger, some smaller. It was all those, you know, it was networking, and whether you actually reach out with those people physically in the future or not, it's the information you glean from them and the perspective gained. That to me was, you know, I would have paid twice as much just for that.
Absolutely.
That's you know, please don't raise the price twice as much. But
no, absolutely. Plus the Apple Final Cut Pro team.
Well, and then yes, of course, that's awesome. But I'm saying even if that wasn't there, even if there was no update, just interacting itself was worth it. The Apple stuff was just a cherry on top, and then
Gabriel,
seeing
don't
a
let 'em off the
update on
hook.
top of that is just like fluff.
You have to have an update. Something. Show us something. So Felipe Baez says, he has 3 comments on YouTube. He says, wow, it's full there today. Then he says, sorry, what? You guys make money with all of this? And then he says, I'm probably doing something wrong, is what he says.
I don't know about that.
I've been promised exposure. I'm not sure about you guys, but I've been promised a lot of exposure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No money.
Well, and experience. Plenty of experience, Tony.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the Craigslistification of the video industry.
Oh my gosh.
So, Bill, what was your favorite new previewed feature of 10.4? Did you have one?
Well, the color thing is, I think, going to touch the most people, but I'm really excited. The fact that Apple is doubling down on the future and they're working ahead of us, because I've always felt that way. I've always felt that these things that they put in there, like for me, the databaseification of a video editing tool, has always been the thing that's most attracted me to Final Cut Pro 10. Even more, you know, in the beginning, it was a clear thing. People who got angry at it were focused on the timeline and how, because that's what they always conceived of as editing, was the timeline. So when they changed the timeline and they added magnetism, everybody blew up and got crazy. But in fact, I think that front end thing is potentially, I always thought the front end stuff was more powerful. So I'm always looking for these things where they taught me that organization was so critical to success going forward. If you don't understand how to manage keywords, if you don't understand how to use these tools to leverage efficiency in your work, that's what you would be missing. Because you would come into 10 and you would edit like you'd edit it in 7 and every other editor you've ever touched. And you just keep doing things the same. And they pulled my brain out of that and moved my brain over to thinking differently. I suspect that this 3D stuff and the deep color and all the rest of that, they're doing the same thing to me. They're pulling me into a new way of thinking about things that I really should be thinking about. Because there's something about them that is going to be where the world is going. That was the feeling I came away with from this summit.
Excellent. Who has a dog?
I don't.
Ben.
That was me. So I'm muting the microphone. Muting the microphone for you guys.
The one guy at a business office is the one with the dog problem.
Oh, I love their dog. They have a cute dog. I've seen it on video before.
Here you go, Lola. Say hi.
Oh,
Hey,
look at
sweetie.
that little pug.
Shoot, where's Charlie? I can come over and we can do dog jousting.
I'll let you go back to sleep, Lola.
I have 2 dogs.
Ah, cool.
By the way, here's some money I just had sitting on my desk. If anybody could tell where this is from, I'll hide it. This is real money.
Richard,
Wow.
where's Elvis?
Elvis is, I have the door closed. He can't get in.
Oh, okay.
Elvis is not in the building.
He's in the building for sure.
He's not in the room.
He dominates the building.
So with the
Oh, look at-
360 updates, do we think that will bloat the code at all for Final Cut, or what are you guys' thoughts on that?
You know, I heard one of the most fascinating things. This has finally seeped into my brain because I always thought the 360 stuff was a looking out technology, right? And I've been talking about it in terms of going to a supermarket and having things pop up with sales and things like that, that you can use your phone to get a VR 360 kind of look around. I heard somebody talking, and when they were talking about facial recognition, the key thing that they mentioned was that Apple had taken an approach where it wasn't so much looking out as it was looking in. That the processing necessary to do 3D facial recognition is still gigantic, but it is a less daunting thing to make sense of a face than it is to make sense of the entire world. And that really lit a light bulb in my thinking and went, so what other things can you do in a close field that is computationally more rational than trying to map the entire world outside of your phone? And that was just an interesting mental change for me.
Seems to me that if they had the technology to scan individual faces and say take identical twins and not not allow the one in. That there's that level of accuracy that we could have easily color correction, tracking, and Final Cut. You know what I mean? If the technology is already there, why not just add that in? I mean,
one of the things about the
assuming this
360
seems tough.
implementation.
Go ahead, Rick.
I think it's kind of gimmicky if you want to know the truth. I mean, 360 has been around, like I said, since the 60s, if probably not before that. And I guess if that's the business you're in, you'd be all excited, you want to do it. But I think it's a passing, like 3D came and went pretty fast. VR, I don't know, unless you're 14 and you're a gamer. And when I actually saw the virtual reality a couple of years ago, and I was really excited about it. And then I thought about it and thought, gee, I don't, like maybe I'm too old, but I don't want to make a movie where you can see 360 degrees. And, it was fun to be sitting in the gondola with that virtual reality and look around and look up. But after 30 seconds of stuff, it's like, you want a story. And by the way, just to put this in context, in a prior life for a while was a senior vice president at Sony New Technologies. And one of the things that I supervised was 3D IMAX films and an interactive feature film produced by Bob Gale, who did Back to the Future, produced and directed by Bob Gale. And what I learned then back in the 90s was that people don't want to sit there with a clicker and decide, should he shoot the girl or go out the door? They want to be told stories. They want to sit there passively. We're producers and directors and editors because we are making these creative decisions, not letting somebody in a seat, decide which door to go in or go out. As far back as Expo 67, if I can really, date myself age-wise, I can remember sitting in a theater and at the Czech Pavilion, they stopped every 5 minutes and said, okay, should he go left or right? And what they did was they had two 35mm projectors running in sync, and the audience would vote he'd go to the right. So then they start the two projectors, but they'd only run the right projector, but they'd end up back at the same place. Now, should he go with the girl or should he not go with the girl? I don't want to make those decisions. I want the director to make those decisions.
I haven't seen anything in 360 that's excited me personally. But I think that whole realm is much, much bigger than 3D was for screens. I think the potential applications are much, much bigger than most of us even can conceive of at the moment.
I'm really curious about how they're going to merge this with AR and how they can merge 360 video with AR. If you think about, like, not in a storytelling perspective, but from a retail perspective of being able to be in a quote-unquote retail room and to be able to see text and motion graphics that pop up AR-wise, and you can maybe even live link to other things. I think that could be interesting for the new way of exploring the internet, so to say. But I don't know. I would be curious to see how they push there.
So at the summit, we had a bunch of people carrying around 360 cameras, right? We had 2 or 3 or 4 of them. So if you overlaid if you overlaid a 16:9 mat in that camera and projected it on your eyeglasses, would that change how camera operators operate? If you did that with motion tracking and some sort of a smoothing algorithm so that the camera operator could shoot and direct us to things easily by walking through a scene, that would be interesting for content capture.
Well, Bill, I think they mentioned that in the new version, I think you can use equirectangular footage in a flat timeline, which does, like you said, give you the ability to reframe within a 360 sphere.
Right. So maybe camera operators will end up being affected by what we're looking at now. I'm just trying to think outside of these boxes, right? Because we think of 3D as exactly what Chuck was talking about. It's exactly this. You have to make decisions as a viewer. And I'm wondering if there are places up and down this production pipeline where that isn't the case, and that you can actually end up with a more traditional presentation, but using VR tools and 360 tools to accomplish that. Just a thought.
So we have a couple comments on the YouTube chat. Bill says, how do I trade experience and exposure for food and mortgage payments? And Felipe answers him, if you discover the answer to that, please let me know. It will be very useful for me. And also Felipe says, but I think we need to put some money together to furnish Tony's office. It's very naked.
You know what? I am looking at some art, an artist who does a bunch of stuff. But yeah, there's a bunch of boxes around everywhere right now. I'm in transition, so.
Tony,
I highly recommend 30 cents worth of green screen fabric. That's all you need. And you can theoretically put anything behind you, as someone did to me on one of our chats. Did you guys see that?
Yeah. Well, you do have that green screen right behind you, Bill.
Yeah,
I do, but I haven't lit it up today for exactly that reason. I probably should, but then somebody will key me over something embarrassing.
You don't have to do that. I could still key you off of that background.
I know, you can. That's the problem.
I can probably do it live.
And thank you, Felipe. I'm looking forward to that website too, actually. Here, let me change the scenery so you guys get a better view of the office.
So do you guys remember the controversy over the MagSafe when the MacBook Pros came out last year?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Look what I got.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a new one that was on Kickstarter. It's not the one that Griffin had. It's much smaller, and it has pass-through. It has all your video, audio, everything, the Ethernet pass-through. It's not just a dummy one.
Really?
Just for power.
So when somebody walks by and kicks the cable off, you don't now lose just power. You're also going to lose data transfer.
No, Bill, you don't transfer your data through this. You have 3 other ports to transfer your data. That's the direct connection to a hard drive.
I guarantee you, if it is a potential failure point, somebody will fail through it. It's just human nature.
It's much better than the original MagSafe.
No, I think they're a good idea. I try not to work in places where my cords are walk passable, but I do get, again, what I'm saying is if it's possible to fail that way, someone will do it.
So Tony, you've changed position there. So this beautiful stuff is behind you all the time. Is this your house or your office? Where are you?
This is my office. And
Very
this is the office dog, Roscoe.
Roscoe, what a nice dog.
there you go.
It's my roommate's, no, he's in my lap, sorry. My roommate's dog.
So Felipe says, now we know that Tony wasn't in the bathroom.
I haven't flushed yet.
So Karen says, did Apple mention anything about Safari being able to support 360? I didn't hear that.
I don't think
No,
so.
they didn't mention that.
Well, that should be coming, don't you think, at this point?
I would expect it to.
Because they're big on 360 VR stuff or AR stuff.
Yeah, will that require an update to the HTML standard? Because they're very much Flash averse, right?
Yeah.
Oh, is that how like Google or Chrome is doing it as Flash?
Well, Chrome can build whatever tools they want to build. You know, Google owns YouTube, right? So they've got the same playback engine. So any videos they play, they just play through the YouTube engine.
Well, Apple has to support it.
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice if they did.
Bill, what's the name of your dog?
It's Charlie. Say hello, Charlie. Hi.
What a nice dog.
Hey, Charlie.
He's a good boy.
Does this mean I have to go get my dog or one of them?
I think it's
I
important.
think you do have to, Chuck. Yeah.
It's required now. It's mandatory.
Here you go, Charlie. Go play.
So I want to know, guys. I know after the presentation of Friday, there was a lot of backlash. A lot of people said, "Hey, this isn't enough. Where's this feature and that feature?" What do you guys feel like after the release? Do you feel like this was a misstep on Apple's part, or do you think
Here's the thing. I completely understand people who want different features or more features, but let's wait till 10.4 is released before we start commenting on, oh, they didn't give us X, Y, and Z. Let's wait for 10.4 to be released. I think there's going to be more than what we've seen. This is like the first iteration, but I think there's hopefully some audio stuff coming. So
as soon as the updates were posted, people were negative right out of the gate. And after 6 years, I guess I'm just used to it. If you still don't like Final Cut, then just go ahead and use something else. Like, more power to you. You know, it's not like any of us are completely blind, loyalists to Apple. We all have our list of things we want to see. Of course, we're all critical in our own ways, but just I've never been prevented from completing a job in the last 6 years. Sometimes you need a third-party plugin, sometimes not. I could buy every plugin that exists for Final Cut and still would cost me less than any of the other solutions out there. So I just don't, it's just nonstop negative. It's going to be negative, and if it's not Final Cut, the next thing Apple does, Apple's doomed. How many times has that been predicted? So it's just, I kind of just roll. I started to jump online and get negative and try to defend it. It's like, I'm done with that. You can't reason with these people.
Somebody who's really good with math should go back and try to look up all the instances of somebody saying Apple is doomed and going to shut their doors, and find out what would have happened if you just bought $100 worth of their stock every time you saw that message. My suspicion is you'd be retired now.
The first comment I read when I was on the plane after leaving the summit was, it was like, does anybody still actually use Final Cut 10? LOL. It's like, you can't leave an event like this and having been at Apple and then read a comment like that and not just like throw your arms up in the air.
Hey, I have a question for you guys that were at the summit. Were you actually able to play with the different color parameters as yourselves, or was it only view?
Yes.
They had electric diodes on the keyboard, so when you try to touch it, you just get shot.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Now look, it is also not released, right? So it wasn't the same. There was a little bit of, you can tell they're still working. They're still down there because a lot of it was demos. I mean, they had an Apple representative, and we know most of those guys are women, at every station working. So it wasn't quite the same as the last time where they took you off in a room and just sat you down in front of it and said, play. So I think that at this stage, pre-release, there's probably still a way to crash the software by clicking the wrong 6 things. I'm sure they're going to quash those things as we go. And so that when it's actually released, like most Apple software, there's a real good chance it'll work solidly and stably. But I did notice that was a difference. Last time they just said, hands on, have fun. It was a release piece.
Right.
This time it was, let us show you how it works. And they didn't encourage us to take the seat and drive.
Right.
So Patrick, Rob Mills on the YouTube chat says, do we know if they have to update the OS? I presume he means to High Sierra for this.
I mean, they didn't mention that during the presentation, and I don't know if every demo machine was on High Sierra. I wouldn't expect so.
Well, what about the H.265? Maybe for that you have to.
Well, yeah, obviously for H.265, if you're using HEVC, yes, you need High Sierra to be able to support that. And hopefully by the time it's released, some of the High Sierra bugs are kind of ironed out, because I feel like High Sierra is still kind of a little bit of a buggy OS in many regards.
Yeah.
Yes.
So personally, I'm hoping that that's not required and that I don't have to update to be able to use 10.4.
Now you tell me. You didn't tell me before I went to California. Now you tell me.
Sorry, Richard. I mean, that's just my personal hopes and feelings about the situation.
I'll be darned.
I have a client call I have to take, but before I cut out, I'll just say that over the years, I know Apple has responded to our feedback requests, a handful of us, but at the event, I mean, they were asking questions. They would talk to me, they talk to all kinds of people. Like, they're definitely curious about what we want. And I was really impressed by that. It's one thing to hear about it. It's another thing to see it firsthand, to see people from the Pro Apps team asking questions, and not just in passing, but, following up on the questions and being really curious about, not just what we want, but how we might want to see it implemented. So
let me piggyback on that, Gabriel, because I was specifically asked, and in sitting down with a couple of people, I would have somebody who I know from Apple who would come up and say, okay, what are your top 5s? What are your top 5 requests that you have, and send them to me? And I just got the general overall feeling that, look, this has been a big rebuild release. I mean, particularly the color stuff touches a lot of place in the software. I mean, it's integrated into the software. It's not just that we did a color thing here on the outside and you go to that place and it's just bolted on.
Nobody asked me for my list.
Well, probably weren't at the right place at the right time. All that is saying is that it seems to me that Apple has a past history of they'll do a big thing and then they'll work for a while on bug fixes and feature and littler things, and then they'll come out with a big thing again. It feels to me as if they're going into one of those, okay, it's time to build new features and it's time to address issues, as opposed to this huge 3D and its huge color, get into the software and rip old things out and put new things in their place. That's my impression.
Chuck, your microphone is muted. You have to unmute it.
You know, it feels to me like the last few releases, they've really taken and made foundational changes to the way that Final Cut works. So I feel like, you know, I feel like in many ways, we're getting the foundations of things that they'll be building on for years and years. So, you know, one of the complaints I remember having seen was, hey, why didn't we get better audio tools? And well, they just rebuilt that foundation last year, right? So my guess is we're going to see a few more foundational things, and then we'll start seeing improvements upon everything. Would be, you know, that'd be my guess, but who knows?
So Jeff Greenberg just joined us. Jeff, it's been an hour ad for Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. You've missed all of it.
I'm so sorry. I could not get off the phone with a client.
Well,
you know, some days that happens.
Well, Jeff, don't take it personally. I've got to jump on the call with the client. I wish I could stay to chat with you.
Oh my God, it's my fault. It's totally
No,
my
it's
fault.
not. It's fine. See you later, guys.
See you later, Gabriel.
Bye,
Nice
Gabriel.
talking to you. So Jeff, one of the things I wanted to say, I was talking earlier when Patrick was on about how much of a fantastic presenter he was, to see him in person rather than just on these chats and things. In person, personable, knowledge of subject matter. One, he was very organized presenting, and you're the exact same way. I wasn't sure how much you knew about Final Cut Pro versus like a broad spectrum of Premiere and other things, but you know a lot about Final Cut Pro, and I really enjoyed the presentations that you had.
You're a very kind man. I, like everybody here, I actually never rejected Final Cut 10. I hate to tell everybody that.
I didn't either.
I picked it up right from that first day. I had to do a webinar 9 days into it. And to give you an idea, for the last year, I've been doing an event called the Final Cut Pro Weekly for Linda. It's, you know, I actually will tune in to Steve and Mark's piece regularly. It's like my dearest friends are doing stuff that I sadly compete with. I like what I do. I like what they do. Final Cut 10 for me is just this fast, amazing tool. And I refuse to not dig into it as deeply as I can.
I thought you just did it off of those tip shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, those tip shows are me pouring through my notes trying to find something really bizarre that guys like you might not know. If I can find one. I remember last year I found one that like 4 of the engineers on Final Cut didn't know, and I just had a moment. I just had like a heart-choking moment where I was stunned I could find something they didn't know.
So I recorded your tips and tricks show, and people keep saying, "Oh, can you transcribe that?" I said, "Hell no." I said, that belongs to Jeff Greenberg.
If you send it to me, I will use one of the transcription session services. I will publish the notes myself. It might take me an extra week, and I'll tell you what, we can do it very publicly. At least for the ones that I don't think anybody will have any problems with me doing that, as long as we're not showing the screen, because some of the footage we didn't have like wide broadcast access to.
Right, exactly. But I do have the entire thing filmed with you and Abba, so if you want a copy, you can certainly have it.
I absolutely would love a copy, and I'll be happy to do all the legwork. It might take a week or two. I have to jet out of here tomorrow to teach in Dallas.
Well, there's no rush. We don't need it until before the next summit. By the way, when's the next summit, so we know when the next update for Final Cut is?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't know how much you guys talked about this. What we saw from Apple was unprecedented. I've never seen Apple show any group software before it ships. They didn't mention a day, but this, it sent shivers up my spine. And then the next thing occurred to me, how do I top this for next year?
All I want to know is when
Tim Cook appearance. Send his secretary a note. Put it on your calendar for next year.
Yeah, it's good that you say that, and I didn't.
Right.
I said to their people internally, I don't know how we top this. I know what the marketing is. The marketing is in 2016, Apple gave us hands-on with the brand new MacBook Pros and Final Cut 10.3 the day after its release. In 2017, Apple showed us as an exclusive community it before they showed it anywhere else publicly, and let us talk about it. What's 2018 going to bring? That's the marketing line. And now all I got to do is get them to deliver. So all I will say, and I'll just keep it between us girls here.
Yes.
If we move the time and date of the conference, it'll probably be their idea.
Okay, that's a nice
Just saying.
hint. Yeah, that's a nice. Hey, I had a weird thought. You know, I understand this. All these things, all these presentations at the summit have IP restricted things in them. Usually, at least a lot of them do, and that's perfectly fair. But boy, would it be nice if the people who have decks and some of them are sharing the decks through the website, app group and stuff like that. It would be really awesome if after somebody does a presentation, if they did their own little, just walk through their deck and describe some of the slides real quick in a capture, and then make that available to some people. Because what I heard from everybody over and over again is I really wanted to go to at least 2 out of the 3, or maybe all 3 of those things. And I totally get what FMC has as their, you know, we can't just put this out live for everybody because then nobody will come, we won't make any money, and the whole house of doing this kind of collapses a bit. But boy, it would be great to have some function like that.
That's all Jeff Greenberg.
Yeah, it's all Jeff Greenberg. Yeah, thanks. My seat just got noticeably warmer. I feel the same way, boy. I feel the same way. Is that Chuck?
Yeah. Hi, Jeff.
We've all had our dogs on at one point.
Chuck, if I had known I was supposed to bring pets.
I didn't know until just a little while ago, so I brought Stevie in here to say hello.
Hi, Chuck. Hi, Stevie. So we run through, Bill, we run through a couple of things as issues. The least of which actually is the FMCB making a profit on it. Again, I work with them. I don't work for them. They contract me to build the grid. I will take full responsibility for there being great content in multiple places. That's the best problem one could have.
Absolutely.
The problem that we don't want is there were 2 or 3 rooms going on and there was no good content. That's a problem. The story is, and particularly around keynotes, it's just brutally painful for them to get any sort of rights. So now suddenly it's asking people, whether it's me, whether it's somebody like Steve Martin, to go and record on top of it and find the time. Man, I love the idea, Bill. I mean, I love nothing more than I'm now, you now have me going, wait a second, I should go back, fire up Keynote, and do like 1 sentence on each slide throughout all of my slides and just publish that.
Go down and sit in ScreenFlow and just cycle through them and record just your thoughts, and then that becomes a little presentation. And there are guys, you know, Ian and Alex Goldner and those guys, they've already published their decks. They've sent their decks around, so they feel comfortable.
My deck's not out, and I mean it's finished, it's posted. I just need to send it to the group. And the reason that I had to hold off is the best reasons. I had to take out little Sophia and Abigail, my daughters, last night for trick or treating. Right. I live the same thing as all of us do, between deadlines, between client hassles. I love the idea, Bill. Can you find me? I tried the range tool and the speed up in Final Cut 10 on my life. It doesn't make things 30% faster because that's what I need. Bill, just because you asked, I will do it. I don't know when, but I will give myself at most 14 days. There we go. 14 days, 2 weeks. And I'll publish, I think maybe the idea is publishing them inside a group, and maybe for some of it wouldn't be the worst idea as far as future marketing to release that a little after the fact. You should have been here. You should have gotten this in a more interactive format.
Right. And you know, people prepped. Obviously, everybody we know who presents is a good presenter, and they work really hard to put that deck together and have things to say about it. So for Ian Anderson to sit down and go through his deck and just describe it and do a cap of that and put it out as a little video file or whatever, I would think he could do that. And so it'd be a way to get into this other content without requiring a ton of things. You don't have to produce something.
So we got a comment on Facebook that said, given the initial push for a large plugin ecosystem, how does Final Cut Pro's new approach, in particular to the new color tools, affect developers? That's from Sedley.
I think everybody, that idea that we were concerned about Denver Riddle and Chromatic and how what Apple did might affect people who've worked really hard to build applications that do some of these things. And I think that's just the community being thoughtful and considerate. But these things are going to always happen. I mean, you can't have both things, which is a roaring external plugin ecosystem that does great things that people can make money of, and the desire to have some of those same things inside the software truly professionally realized and available for everybody. It's a tension, I think, that's always going to be there.
Yeah. Well, and it seems too, a lot of people have complained about the fact that there weren't better color tools built into Final Cut for years, ever since it first came out. And so, I feel like things like Chromatic and Color Finale have certainly helped quash that to a certain degree, but there are still people who won't even look at Final Cut because they have to pay an extra $100 for, decent color tools. So I think, Bill, you're right. It's this difficult tension of, we've got this great community of developers who are making amazing tools. And honestly, I think the fact that Final Cut has, the tool set native to the app now means that, Roger and Denver are going to be challenged to find new ways to make their apps indispensable. I mean, already there are a few things, like Color Finale still does group grading. Final Cut does not. Chromatic's got, tracking. Final Cut does not.
They're both going to, they both have, I believe at this point, support for the tangent. And I think Apple had to make this decision. We needed LUT workflows directly inside of the tool. I did a session with Sam about color correction, and there we were at the event with the idea that everything that might have been prepared had to be thrown out because we weren't talking about pucks anymore. What did we do? We actually just taught key basics of color correction. And I mean, the rules, the recipe, how you start from scratch. I spoke to Roger and I said, give me 3 things that you're going to be trading your software on. I tried to reach out to Denver, knowing what Apple had done. I don't think it destroys the ecosystem. I think Final Cut 10's color tools were woefully behind the rest of the market, as far as editing is concerned. And they just put themselves, I think, not including Resolve, but between Media Composer, Premiere, and Final Cut. Final Cut's tools are right now the most robust color tools of the 3 major NLEs. With Resolve, of course, way ahead of them. But
right.
It makes a big difference. I pass libraries to assistant editors and other editors constantly, and sometimes I don't have the time to try to redo everything in Color Finale. So if the tools are native and good tools are native, then that just helps me with time and be able to get things done. And I don't have to try to put in the budget to buy them Color Finale because I myself use Color Finale. So for passing things back and forth, I don't want them to be getting media offline or whatever, it pops up for plugin not being there. So the fact that I can push and use that stuff when I'm interacting with other folks makes a big difference, especially when, time is money. We've got to keep moving on some corporate jobs. So that's, for me, it's going to be huge.
Do you think Roger and Denver were told in advance about the new color stuff?
Probably.
Absolutely.
Yes.
There's no way that you're going to go and step on that level of an ecosystem without giving them fair warning. It's so much of it reflects in their tools, reflects in the Apple tools and where the Apple tools went. They had to have been spoken to.
Well, I also note that Denver had a lot of coupon kind of stuff right in the run-up days.
The day before, he had a sale that ended. I think it was like 24-hour sale that ended before the announcement.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right, Chuck. I remember getting like 4 or 5 emails about that the day before.
So he also has been pushing his LUT packs, particularly the new Ascend pack, and it's one of the nice things to kind of between the two companies. I think Color Finale's, part of their magic is Denver is a working colorist who developed the Instagram filters. Roger's the guy who's got the key piece of tools for tracking. They both have got this nice opportunity to do higher level tools for Final Cut, even with the new tools coming out.
Patrick, I didn't see the LumaForge drop-down menu item in the new Final Cut. What's going on there?
Oh, you didn't see the LumaForge button yet?
No, in the new Final Cut.
We were too busy building Tony's jellyfish, I think.
Oh, so you're at fault, Tony.
Well, what is sorry, guys. You know what? Instead of buying art for my office, I bought a jellyfish. What can I say?
Well, that's a good purchase.
What is the new drop-down button for my jellyfish, Patrick?
Oh, well, I think Richard was talking about a non-existent button within Final Cut, but we are working on a menu bar version of our client app. So no longer do you have to open a separate application. You just click in your menu bar and have a list of your mounts, and you toggle on whichever mount you want to use. And so we went from, I think, 3 clicks down to 2 now, something along those lines.
A 33% improvement.
33% easier to use, and it's got a much better.
We're 130% faster.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And one of the other things about the Apple presentation, I'm not sure whose phone that is.
I think it's Chuck's.
Is that presentation video that they did that
oh my God,
that Charlie Austin cut was one of the best I have ever seen from Apple.
Hey, Charlie.
And I talked to them about making it public, and they said they're not against it, but it'll take some work getting all the rights for the different things. Patrick, did you have any footage in there from LumaForge or anything?
Not from LumaForge, but there was some footage from a series that I had cut prior to LumaForge.
Which one?
I cut a series called History Retold.
Okay.
That is now playing on Smithsonian Canada. So our Canadian friends can watch it. But yeah, so I think there were 3 shots from that. There were a few shots from the Challenger disaster doc that David and I worked on, and a few from the Diana doc that he worked on.
The Emmy winning doc that you worked on.
Well, the Challenger, yeah.
The Challenger.
Wasn't there also some shots from Lightsail VR on that?
I didn't see anything from Lightsail VR. I did see stuff from James Tonkin.
Yeah.
Lightsail, I think, is secretly using Premiere right now, but don't tell anybody I said that.
We won't tell anybody.
I just know the guys over there, and Matt Sela is a buddy. I just noticed I thought I saw their name pop up in the LumaForge presentation.
Oh, maybe in the LumaForge presentation, but not in the video that Charlie Austin cut together.
Yes, presentation.
We definitely would have talked about Lightsail. That brings up back to what we were talking about earlier. Chuck was talking about the gamification of 360 video. And the guys at Lightsail are kind of doing this interesting thing right now where they've shot a bunch of 360 video and created an interactive experience. So they cut everything in Premiere ahead of time and then go into Unity and turn it into an interactive experience. So instead of just experiencing the video, like Chuck was saying, passively, you're experiencing it actively. So the question is, do people want to actively view VR content, or do they want it to be a passive experience? And I think that's yet to be seen, because what these guys are doing is kind of new, mixing both the interactive tools of VR and the powers of 360 video.
Well, if there was ever a constituency on the planet who's used to navigating their own worlds, it's the gamer folk.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that our keynote, aside from David, our other keynote, Simeon Quarry, he has been doing the same thing where he's been shooting and building stuff in 360 and then placing it into the Unity engine. I made it a point for at least Simeon to meet Tim Dashwood, because I think, I don't know, did you guys discuss Final Cut 10's VR interface?
I had a long lunch with Tim and Alex, and yes.
I meant in the show so far. Did you guys talk at all about?
We didn't talk about
no.
the specifics of it. No.
I know the workflow in Premiere. I know the workflow now in Final Cut 10. Boy, 10 looks really smooth for VR. Feels really native to the tool, which is why I had to get Simeon to get some time with Tim. I think that as far as the tools go, Apple's really beginning to address the lack of VR and AR tools going on.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I think something interesting, that week I'd actually been to Lossy Pug Wednesday night, and then Friday we saw the new VR tools in Final Cut. So I had a chance to put my head in a headset for Premiere and a headset for Final Cut in the same week. And I was really amazed at the fact that Premiere had a little bit of their timeline available within the headset. So you could actually do trim start, trim end. And I thought that was cool. But overall, the actual playback performance in Final Cut in a headset seems significantly better than that in Premiere. I don't know what your experience has been there.
My experience has been pretty much the same. I think it's really cool that Adobe showed it about a year earlier that you could edit inside the headset, and it's sort of thing just against my internal grain. I have not cut and played with something internally. I'm waiting for that to happen, but it's because you'd have to keep flipping up and down the goggles. I love the idea you could trim inside the interface, but boy, the nativeness of the VR experience inside of Final Cut 10.4 looks just super comfortable. I think Apple's done a great job of throwing down a gauntlet in a big way at Adobe in both of these spots.
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice if you go into Premiere for a few things, right? There are a few things that require an effect to be able to work. And one of the big things that I noticed was in Premiere, you have to use an effect to take a flat graphic, a 2D graphic, and get it to distort properly within an rectangular sphere so that it actually looks right within the goggles. Whereas in Final Cut, you take a 2D graphic, throw it into the interface, and it automatically works. So I think that's a huge difference. And I don't know how you guys felt, but when they showed the horizon guideline and the fact that you could just click and drag to get your horizon
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Alex Goldner just released an article talking about this, how the approach that Apple has taken is they really thought about it from the ground up versus just kind of tacking, like what you're saying, tacking on, here's a plugin to address something. So it's more a native approach, which from what his article was saying, it's going to yield much better results and interactivity as an editor.
And from my chatting with him, this is the first of two. This one on Medium for a pretty general audience, but I think he's going to do something on his blog that even goes a little farther.
That's good.
So my stock question when I was there, I said, okay, we've seen what Tim Dashwood's been doing for the last year. What's that slacker Wes Plate been doing for the last year?
Yeah, what's going on?
No, Wes, dropped by the last day of the conference and seemed like he was, he couldn't talk about much of anything, but they don't hire people and put them in the room and not let them do things so that, there's something.
Yeah.
It is also interesting, as I talk to people and starting to maybe get little flashes of what people can disclose, it's interesting that there are various teams working on various things that I didn't understand the breadth of, so that, Tim is not working exclusively on Final Cut Pro 10. He is, but it's almost at a higher level on issues that will go into Final Cut Pro 10 as one of its primary targets, certainly. And it's not that his focus isn't on that. It definitely is, as we just saw, with a huge build-in. But there are also other products that Apple have that touch on the 360 world. And I think he has to pay attention to more than just the one thing. So that kind of is a flavor I got out of it. And I would presume that in Wes's circumstance, it's the same thing. We're all focused on what we want, and I think Apple's focus may be in some ways broader and more across the whole of Apple's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I asked that question of Wes. I asked it to him.
I'm thinking based on Wes's previous businesses that we can expect to see Final Cut to Avid very soon.
I want to see Apple people get into compound clips and sync clips and all the virtualized thing. And go ahead, try to do that on an Avid timeline. I dare you.
Patrick, Patrick, I think you mean from Avid to Final Cut, not Final Cut to Avid.
Oh, well, I mean, yes, sure. Yes. Avid to Final Cut, yes.
And Resolve is great for that, by the way.
Resolve is great for that. The interesting thing is when we were there, they only really let us touch, see, play through another person. I think that they were being very protective. Maybe it was about its stability at this point in the build, but more likely there was a lot of other hidden gems aside from the 3 we saw. And I would be stunned if they're not utilizing Wes to his fullest. He is an accomplished editor. I've known him for about 17 years through Avid, through Adobe. This guy really, the last thing I saw him present prior to his employment at Apple, he cut a commercial using Premiere and using After Effects to recut people's positions, cutting them out on it from a red shoot. So he had a commercial and he really picked different takes from different actors and group scenes. He really pushed a lot of the envelope of storytelling in a small, in a short piece. I'm super excited to see what we see in 10.4 as far as editorial concerns, because this guy is paying attention to what the pain points are. He happens to be a lover of Final Cut before he joined that team.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap up here in about 5 minutes, gentlemen. So keep that in mind. So who thinks there's more to see besides the 3 major things that they showed us 3 or 4? I do too. Absolutely. Patrick, you don't?
Huh? Well, I don't know what you're talking. I don't know. I mean, there are definitely things that they didn't show us, like they talked about Red IPP2 integration, and we didn't see that per se. We saw the custom LUTs, so I'm interested to see what they do there. And something that they didn't talk about that we saw was the command left and right controls. So I mean, based on that, I would imagine there'd probably be a few things.
And Jeff, I had mentioned the same thing about 15 minutes ago in this chat, that it was interesting to me that they had someone between us and the interface. It wasn't like last time where it's just, here are the machines, have fun, hack around and edit on the touch bar. They did that last time.
Are you going to let any of the 5 of us, any of the 6 of us on a system unsupervised?
No. But I thought it might be instability, because that's fair. You don't want things crashing, and they, it is not release software. This is beta or whatever, the alpha, beta, who knows where they are in the
But they lit Tony Gallardo. I mean, not Tony. They lit Gabriel Spalding on the machine. I was right there when they lit him on. He asked. He said, "Yeah."
Just such a nice guy. How can you resist?
Exactly.
They did let me play around on one machine. Maybe it was on accident. I think Luke turned around and said, "Are you going to give the presentation, Patrick?"
Did you run up to the new iMac Pro up on stage and start hacking away on that?
No. In the presentation space, there were 2 machines off to the right, and I sat down at one and started playing. And another thing that I thought was interesting, any of you guys ever use the RGB parade when you're doing your color grading?
All the time.
Yeah. So what I noticed was on the color wheels, they have these masters, highlights, midtones, and shadows boxes that if you twirl down, it just says RGB, and it has like a number. But I found that if you click and drag that up and down, it adjusts just that channel. So it looks like you've got the ability, more or less like RGB sliders within the color wheels tools.
So they've taken what is essentially the position metrics from the inspector, where you can just click on a number and drag up and down and change incrementally.
Right. So you don't have like an actual slider UI, but you have the ability to click and drag that number up and down, so that if you're doing your white balancing using your parade or an RGB overlay, you've got that control over just that color channel, which I think is interesting. And what did you guys think about the eyedroppers on the RGB curves?
Oh, people are going to go crazy. I know people have been screaming at me about white balance eyedroppers, and the way they did it, where it's so much more visual. You can just click on 3 places on the picture and get 3 values, and then change the center keyframe from that. Or I was thinking, I haven't touched it, but I was thinking if you put 4 values in, can you raise the line of those 4, like keyframing and audio. That would be awesome. It just looked really fast and really flexible and really intuitive.
Yeah.
Hard to get all three of those in one implementation.
It's the same generalized feature that's in Resolve. You can do a lot of secondary based qualifiers based on those eyedroppers. So it becomes a lot easier to say, do hue versus hue or hue versus sat with those eyedroppers. I was very happy to see that because it's great for, well, I know what I'm doing in the color space, and even knowing what I'm doing, it's nice to be able to go, yeah, I just want that pixel right there that I want to adjust. I think it's going to make things a lot easier for people to use these curves rather than hunting around. Yeah. They really took the page right out of Resolve's book in that regard.
Well, I think something interesting that they're doing that Resolve isn't doing. Did you see how you could actually, on the RG and B curves, you could use an eyedropper to change the hue of that curve?
I heard about that. That's interesting.
I thought that was interesting.
I think not in the RGB curves, but in the hue versus sat. Yeah, hue versus hue. Resolve has that.
Resolve has that, but Resolve does not have the ability on your RG and B curves to change blue to orange or magenta.
Yeah.
And then do that sort of a curve, which I thought was interesting.
They also had an interesting curve that when you sampled, it said, "Oh, that's what this color is."
Yeah,
you know?
it was on the hue versus sat panel, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it starts at the very bottom.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I checked out with the system, with the Final Cut Pro 10.4 preferences, and one of the preferences it had was the 2018 Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. You had a checkbox to click where you wanted that to be.
Spaceship, the new spaceship.
No, yeah, that was the disappointment in this. I had kind of hoped last year that we might be able to see the new mothership.
Well, you could drive around it on your own free time, right?
Yeah, all of us had cars and free time.
you could fly your drone over it, but I think then you disappear in the middle of the night.
Do you think Apple's going to have a drone shoot down gun to take care of drones flying over their spaceship campus?
I'm just wondering how many crashed drones they've collected during construction.
Maybe they've got an EMP gun that they aim at the drones.
That sounds more like it.
Oh, I have a fan who just showed up.
Oh. Hello, how are you, sweetheart?
Hold on, I'll put the headphones on.
Absolutely.
Thank you. This is one of my two daughters.
Hi.
Hello, sweetie.
Hello. Your dad's talking to editors from all over the world right now. We're all in different places.
Did you know your dad was famous?
No, she doesn't know any of that stuff. She does. I think next year is when I'm going to start teaching her iMovie and Final Cut. So we're all in threat, of the younger generation editing.
I don't know. I think she's got a future on the talent side, Jeff.
Certainly because of mommy, not because of daddy.
Well, whatever. It's working regardless.
All right, gentlemen, we're gonna sign off here. We've been on for almost an hour and 50 minutes, something like that.
Oh wow!
So,
wow.
Bill Davis,
Yes.
Chuck Braverman, Jeff Greenberg, Patrick Southern, and Tony Gallardo, and I'm Richard Taylor. We thank you all for watching this. This will remain up at the same link that I sent you on YouTube, so people can go to it and watch it and enjoy it. Gentlemen,
Cheers.
I'll see y'all later.
Cheers. Thanks.
Adios.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.